This is the Tree of Life, Season 14, Chapter 7. In this episode, we will be explaining why lower frequencies corresponding to affirmation of one impulse and negation of another for a specific individual leads to infinite recursion. We will be also exploring how the binary logarithmic scale can be used. To start off, in the last episode, we talked about how a lower frequency arising out of a phase elongation with respect to a given cycle or rhythm, which corresponds to a particular arrangement of affirmation with respect to one impulse and negation with respect to a dialectical impulse, makes infinite recursion more likely. In this episode, I would like to explore why. If you imagine that there is a 5-person structure with person A at the top and persons B, C, D, E, situated below person A. And you imagine that person A affirms impulse 1 or impulse 2 for each of B, C, D, E. Then we can say there are 16 said arrangements of this structure. Now this of course entails imagining this structure at a snapshot of a particular moment in time. However, as indicated, each of these individuals has a particular cycle associated with each phase. Thus, the arrangements are not static in time, but rather shift. Now, the faster the frequency associated with affirmation of a particular impulse, the more frequently it flips phase. Likewise, the longer the period, the slower the frequency and the less frequently it flips phase for any given person B, C, D, E. Thus, we can observe that when one or more of the individuals has a slower frequency than the others, this has a powerful impact on the number of arrangements permissible. In fact, if we imagine that person B has a period associated with phase 1 which is say twice as long as for person C, D, E, then we can observe that during the difference between those periods, the number of arrangements is halved. In other words, if person B is static with impulse 1 affirmed and impulse 2 negated for twice the time frame as C, D, E, then during that additional time, the number of potential arrangements to the structure is halved. This is interesting for several reasons. First, what we observed with respect to displacement mirroring is that the descent into infinite recursion is severed by the redistribution, or migration, with respect to some negated impulse. That is, a shift in arrangement as between person B and some person C, D, or E. This means that a failure to shift arrangement caused by a comparatively longer period would prevent displacement mirroring as an operation. Likewise, we can observe that the overall displacement, or change permissible within a structure, is shaped by the number of arrangements available to it. More importantly, hierarchy, arising out of preferential expectation matching, or in-group, out-group formation, is reliant upon the number of arrangements as well. Finally, we also see that the orders associated with given bodily rhythms or cycles can be described by the binary logarithm. Likewise, we can describe any period associated with a particular impulse, i.e. the scale of negation, as defined by the binary logarithm as well. Thus, for example, the breathing cycle at a period of 4 seconds is the first order designated by a 2. The sleep cycle designated as 16. And so on and so forth. Since we know that the sublimation, at the conclusion of a substitution event, elongates the phase associated with a rhythm, and we know that the particular verbalizations associated with that sublimation describe the flipping of an impulse from negation to affirmation, we can hypothesize that the phase associated with elongation describes the order of its impact on the stability of an arrangement. I.e., if sublimation elongates the sleep cycle by 50%, then we assign the order of that sublimating verbalization as 16 to 17. That's the end of the podcast for today.